My name is Laura, and I am making my first YouTube video. I've never made a YouTube video before, and what inspired me to do this was the series Black Mirror. It beautifully depicts the human condition and has a lot of implication for counselors and mental health counseling. So the episode that I'm going to use today to analyze is Playtest. But before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I got my bachelor's in psychology from New York University, and I'm 2 weeks away from completing a master's program in clinical mental health counseling at Fairleigh Dickinson University. So I am certainly new to the field, but I was inspired to do this, so let's get started. Before I get into it though, I should tell you, this is going to spoil the episode completely if you haven't already seen it. So if you haven't watched it, turn this off now, go watch the episode. It's awesome. Don't ruin it for yourself by watching this first. Please, please, please don't do that. If you've already watched it, then welcome. Okay, so the premise is a video game simulation that creates fearful scenarios based on the individual's deepest, darkest fears. So the idea is that people will be able to confront their worst fears without harm through the use of this video game. It starts first with his fear of spiders, then the bully from way back when. But as the simulation continues, the protagonist is forced to confront some much more threatening and, quite frankly, disturbing fears. He takes a 6-month trip gallivanting around countries, and he leaves to do this in the early morning without notifying anyone. So, interestingly enough, not only does he not tell anyone in the house that he's leaving for several months to go on a trip, but then when his mother calls him, he ignores the phone call. Later, he does give some explanation as to why he does this. So, why don't we actually take a look at that?
Is that to just stop her from calling is, I don't know, answer it.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a can of worms I just don't want to open.
Worried? You're her son, you've been traveling, and I just think if you speak to her, then...
Yeah, well, I don't know, I still live at home with her.
That's cool, that's fine.
Yeah. I was taking care of my dad.
Oh,
And,
shit, is he...
No, he died.
Oh,
yeah,
God,
last
sorry.
year. No, it's okay. It was coming for a while. It was early onset Alzheimer's.
That must have been really tough.
Yeah, he was my best friend. Sometimes he'd just look at me and wouldn't even know who I was. But my mom, like, I don't know how to talk to her. You know, like, I don't have that connection. I don't even know where to start. So that's why I left. That's why I went on this trip. Just to get away and make, all the memories that I can while I can.
He wants to make all the memories he can while it's still possible. This points to his own fear of developing Alzheimer's, which he then confronts in the game. So our thoughts, our memories, opinions, the parts of our body, they're all compounded phenomena that we look at and we call our self. This is me. But when you separate those things, there's really no self to be found. You have veins, you have bones, brain waves, beliefs, emotions, and all the conditions that had to come together in order to bring those things into existence, bring them together. So there's no single static, unchanging thing that you can really point to and say, this is me. And once we see this illusion, the self dissolves, And this disillusion of self is the most frightening thing that human beings can confront, i.e. death. This is why we have the fear of death, because death is the dissolution of the self. And this is why diseases like Alzheimer's are so terrifying and so devastating. And in the game, he confronts his fear of losing himself to Alzheimer's, and his subsequent decision to go on this trip and make memories while he can makes a lot more sense to us.
Technically. Look in the mirror behind you. Do you recognize yourself? Do you even know who you're looking at? Soon you won't be anything. You'll be just like your dad.
Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
That's what really scares you, isn't it?
Shut up.
So now his 6-month trip, makes a lot more sense. And that statement, I want to make all these memories while I still can, really makes a lot more sense. But there's still that additional layer of, well, why didn't he at least tell his mother where he was going to go? Alzheimer's disease isn't just painful for those who develop the disease, it's also painful to those who love the individual that has developed Alzheimer's. Because just like we cling to ourself, we also cling to other quote-unquote selves as well. And just like our self is impermanent, changing, dynamic, fleeting, so is the other person's self. And the most important other or self to a human is the caregiver or caregivers. And that brings us to his mother. So let's recap. He lived with his parents, caring for his dying father. Once his father died, he left his mother without warning, who had just lost her husband to a really devastating disease. He leaves her alone to go travel around the world for various countries with no goodbye, and then refuses to answer her phone calls. Just to really seal the deal on this point, let's take a look at this clip of how distressed he gets over the thought of speaking with his mother on the phone. Come on, almost there. So as you can see, he can't even bring himself to speak with his mom. He can't bring himself to call her, and he can't bring himself to pick up her calls. And it really seems kind of peculiar and might not make sense to the viewer right away. And you can't help but ask, geez, why can't he just pick up the phone for his mom? So let's recall that he did indeed give a reason for this behavior to the London girl he met at the bar, telling her that his father was his best friend, and he simply didn't create the same bond with his mother. Although this statement might quench the curious viewer a little bit, it's still kind of empty. The behavior still seems strange. So let's actually look at this statement again, because it's really, really, really critical.
My best friend. Sometimes he'd just look at me and wouldn't even know who I was.
Okay. Sometimes he would look at me and he wouldn't even know who I was. Remember this quote, because it's central to understanding the end of the episode. With that in mind, let's actually take a look at it right now. And mind you, it's going to be painful to watch now that all of this is coming together. Also, guys, keep in mind, this is still part of the simulation. He imagined that it was over and that he returned home, but it's still part of the simulation.
Mom.
Call him.
Mom.
Where did Cooper go?
Mom. I'm right here. I'm right here, Mom.
I have to call Cooper. I have to call him, make sure that he's safe. I have to call him.
His worst fear. This is what he confronted at the very, very end of the episode. His absolute worst fear. It wasn't even he himself developing Alzheimer's and losing himself. His worst fear was that his mother would develop Alzheimer's and forget who he is, re-traumatizing him with the same loss, agony, and peculiar rejection that he experienced with his father. And this is the fear. This is the final, deepest fear that he confronts before the simulation activator removes the device and he dies. He said he would look at me and not know who I am. This is precisely what he feared would happen. He would yet again lose another person so central to his life and so important to the formative and developmental years when he was most vulnerable, his other caregiver, his mother. What better way to protect yourself from the unconscious fear of losing the one we love most than to create the conscious ruse of not having the connection or knowing where to start? After all, if you don't feel connected to someone, then it won't hurt so much when they leave, when they forget who you are. He said his father would look at him and not even know who he was. And his worst fear was that the exact same thing would happen between he and his mother, which it did at the end of the simulation. Leaving without saying goodbye, ignoring her calls, all a part of the conscious resolution to his unconscious fear, pretending that he doesn't care to be with his mother, pretending that he doesn't feel connected to her because he's afraid he's going to lose her. And this is why in his final moments of life, he finally called Mom. Shows why counselors, especially those practicing from a psychodynamic approach, must be patient. And for those of you who don't know what I mean by psychodynamic, psychodynamic means delving into the unconscious. Basically, what are you lying to yourself about? People are not supposed to confront their worst fears as quickly as we can see the pieces coming together as the counselor. The client can't handle that. And this is exactly why Cooper died. In order for him to access all that agonizing insight, yes, insight can be agonizing, every neuron in his brain had to fire at once. And since the brain cells generate electricity, his brain essentially electrocuted him and killed him. So patience, people. Make invitations to clients to access insight and then follow their lead to see how far they can handle going, which might be nowhere at all. But never ever try to drag them there. With that being said, if there's another episode that you guys think I should analyze, feel free to make a suggestion in the comments below.